First thing I want to mention was Stoic Week 2024. Now, I'm not sure if, can I get a show of hands as to anyone who's done Stoic Week before?
Means we're ahead of our head. We can see Judith now. And we can see
Not
the
really. Okay, so Stoic Week is put on by the modern Stoicism movement. It's a global non-profit that we're also part of at Stoicon-X. It's a free, all the resources are free. There are activities, meditations, practices, but you do have to sign up. So if you're interested, as I say, it starts Monday. Just Google Stoic Week 2024, and you just sign up using your email, and then all the resources day by day emailed to you. So I can highly recommend it. I've done it a number of years, and it's had a major revamp this year apparently. So this year there are several enhancements, including new daily exercises designed to deepen Stoic practice. And they're going to focus on one of our very favourite Stoic passages, Marcus Aurelius Meditations 2.1. So do we all remember what Marcus Meditations 2.1 is all about? It's all about the difficult, envious, antisocial, rude people that we're likely to encounter on a daily basis, and how we're going to anticipate that. And we can't be angry with them, because, as Will has been underlining, we are all related, we are all part of the same body, we need to work together, we're made to work together, like the upper and lower teeth, like feet, like hands. So that's Meditations 2.1. And another new feature for Stoic Week this year, which I think is going to be excellent, it's designed to be a practice when we're confronted with a situation which can stimulate us to feel a proto-passion or first movement. So this is part of Stoic theory. And I think it's actually a very sophisticated piece of psychological observation, that the Stoics say that everybody, even the sage, will feel a first movement or a proto-passion. If they're up on a height, they might feel some fear, or if they've seen a battlefield scene, for example, which was something that Marcus dealt with on a daily basis. When they see wounds and mutilations, they will feel dismay. So even the sage is going to feel those first negative sensations. And so this is a new practice to deal with it. It's an acronym, a mnemonic, which is a way of helping our memory. And it's an acronym with STOIC. S is for stop, recognise a challenging situation. T is for time out, take a step back, breathe, give yourself time to analyse. O is to observe, reflect on your initial thoughts and feelings. I is for identify, find a Stoic perspective to guide you, whether that's, it might be the view from above. You might think, okay, I need to rise above this situation and look at it as if I were on a height, and will seem less confronting. And finally, C is for choose. Decide how to respond in a probably Stoic way. So I think that little mnemonic, that little acronym, is going to be quite helpful. So that's Stoic Week. Check it out. Okay, fresh in 2024 is Southern Star Stoics, from which we've got Moses and Denise here today. It's been developed with the encouragement of Phil Yarnov, who's part of this modern Stoicism team. And you might know about Phil Yarnov organises monthly conversations for modern Stoicism. But because they're in the Northern Hemisphere, they're in a really difficult time zone for us, although I know Denise regularly attends, but she's a better woman than I. But so that's Southern Star Stoics is in a time zone that's more manageable for us here. Oh, John's here as well from Southern Star Stoics. Manageable for us in the Southern Hemisphere. It's the third Thursday evening of each month. If you're interested, see Denise. You do have to register for the sessions, and I think John, Will, you're going to be the November guest. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. Fantastic. So that's Southern Star Stoics. Now, this is so new that I only found out about it on Tuesday. Here in Melbourne, there is an Australian Research Council funded project at Monash University towards a female Stoic tradition, women's writings in England, 1600 to 1800. Now, ARC Discovery grants are usually between $30,000 and $500,000. I don't know where this one falls. The lead researcher is Dr. Jacqueline Broad from Monash. And the description of the project says it will offer a positive, gender-inclusive narrative to be told about Stoicism in the period. So I guess it's a historic perspective, which is kind of different from what we do here. We're trying to bring the learnings into our everyday lives, but I would say that historical perspectives are never just historical, right? They always have resonances for today. And I'm assuming that somebody in the federal government thinks that this was worth supporting with a great deal of taxpayer money. So I'll be very interested to see what comes out of this project. And just to underline this sense that even historical approaches really are all about what we make them today. So another article I read just this week was by the historian of religion, Brent Nonbury, and he says, things or perhaps better traces of the past, such as Stoicism, do exist, but what is meaningful about them are the uses to which we put them here in the present. So I would say this research project from Monash is historical, but there may be learnings we can take from it. I will be following up with Jacqueline Broad, and maybe she can talk to us maybe next year. I will be interested to see what comes out of the project. Now this is different. Edward may be on the line. I'm not sure he was going to be here today, but he couldn't be. This is the Zeno Stoic Centre. Now this is a new centre that's based in Larnaca in Cyprus, which was the ancient Kidium, the home of Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. Apparently there's a launch forthcoming, but that's all I know about it. So I'm hoping that Edward, who's based in Sydney, will keep us apprised of what's going on with the Zeno Stoic Centre. Okay, on to new books, which I would recommend checking out if you're interested in developing your Stoic learning. The first one is Stoic Ethics, the Basics by Christopher Gill and Brittany Pollard, who are again both members of the Modern Stoicism team. Now, I've downloaded this book, but I haven't actually read it yet, but I'm sure it'll be excellent because Christopher Gill and Brittany Pollard are both really knowledgeable authorities in Stoicism. The top themes covered include, does happiness depend only on virtue? This is one thing we've already discussed. How does virtue relate to other values? There's a discussion about the indifference, wealth, privileges, and so on. I should say that Christopher Gill has already addressed these issues, some of them in his 2022 book, Learning to Live Naturally, which is also well worth reading. Is Stoic ethics grounded on nature? How do we learn to be good? And what does Stoicism contribute to modern virtue ethics and life guidance? A much briefer book is also forthcoming next month, I understand, by Tana Campbell and Kai Whiting. Now, I do have to declare an interest. I read an early draft of this book and made comments on it. But it should be, the whole idea is it's a brief and accessible overview. So it's meant to be a beginner book, and I think it will serve that purpose really well. So that's coming out next month, one to look out for. Now, this Stoicism for Dummies it's been out about a year, I think, by Tom Morris and Gregory Basham. It's actually more in-depth than you might think. So don't write it off. I think it's a useful general guide, but it has got in fact, it goes into a great deal of detail about some of the historical aspects, more than you might think. So don't write it off if you think it might be a bit basic. I think it's one you could also learn from. So I'd actually recommend that one too. And the final book I want to talk about is the one that we covered this morning with William O. Stevens, his and Scott Aiken's version of Epictetus and Viridian. It's highly recommended. As I said, it's a general guide to Stoicism, not just on Epictetus, but on the whole philosophy. So that's what's new in Stoicism. Now, I also do have a presentation, a final presentation, which I think, which I'll go to now, which is about my forthcoming book, which I hope will be coming out next year. Okay, so my book is about Marcus Aurelius and his legacies. And I'm calling this presentation Finding Marcus Aurelius and Friends. So the tentative title is Marcus Aurelius and His Legacy, Seeking Rome's Kingdom of Gold. Now, the reason I chose this theme of the Kingdom of Gold was from this great statement by the historian Cassius Dio. Now, Cassius was one of the sources we have for Marcus's lifetime. Cassius was actually born in Marcus's lifetime, and we think he may have been an eyewitness to some of the events that he describes. And he's an absolutely essential guide to historical background of Marcus's life. And Cassius says about when Marcus Aurelius dies in 180 and his son Commodus inherits the imperial throne, Cassius says, "Our history now descends from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust, as affairs did for the Romans of that day." So that gave me the idea to look for this kingdom of gold, to find the traces of Marcus's legacies throughout succeeding history. So this is where we start. This is the Caelian Hill in Rome, or Celio as it's called nowadays. And that road I'm standing on there, that's called the Clevis Scari, and it's a very ancient Roman road, and it goes up the hill. And you can see there's these amazing arches over it. The arches are actually medieval, but just to the left as you're looking at it, beneath ground level now, there's a complex of Roman houses, which were probably extant in Marcus's lifetime. Some with wall paintings, both pagan and later Christian. And so the Caelian Hill or Celio, you can see through the arches there, it's quite a leafy place. It's actually the quietest of Rome's famous 7 hills. And you can go there and you can imagine little Marcus and his sister Annia running around on the Caelian Hill. I did anyway. On the way up, the Clevis Scari, it's a new museum called the Former Urbis Museum. And this is amazing. So the Former Urbis was a big marble map of Rome that was created in the generation after Marcus Aurelius' death by Emperor Septimius Severus. And he had it put up on a wall. Obviously, it's fallen into hundreds and hundreds of pieces, but now those pieces have been assembled and they've been laid out on top of a printed plan of Rome. You can see in the picture, and there's glass over the top. All these hundreds of pieces have been assembled. So you can actually walk on the glass and just look at these ancient sites in Rome. It's amazing. But there's also an outdoor section for this museum with lots of gravestones and memorials to the Anni family, which was Marcus's family, because in those times they owned a lot of that real estate, so they commemorated it. Okay, so Marcus Aurelius was a great military leader, and he was awarded a triumphal arch. Now, this triumphal arch, if you've been in Rome or seen pictures of Constantine's arch near the Colosseum, that's familiar. There's the Arch of Titus, that's still there. But Marcus's arch isn't there anymore. And we think where it extended was across what's now the Corso in Rome, which was in ancient times the Via Flaminia. It was the great highway to the north. And it's where Marcus led his troops out on Via Flaminia and returned triumphant. But we think that this arch was extant as late as the 17th century. And in fact, it was this inscription here that I've got a picture of, Alexander VII, Pontifex Maximus, that was a Pope, Pope Alexander VII. In this inscription, he explains how he got rid of this ugly, in the way kind of structure to make it easier for the horse races that took place on the Corso. And I remember reading this inscription thinking, hang on, he's actually boasting about demolishing Marcus's arch. Are you kidding me? This was actually where I started thinking about writing this book in the first place. So I had to go and see this inscription, and it's high up on the corner of the Via del Corso and the Via della Vite. So yeah, was this where Marcus's great triumphal arch was until 1665, when the Pope removed it to tidy the road? We're not sure, to be honest, but I think it may have been. Now, here's a picture from earlier in the 17th century, the Arco de Portugallo, and it was called that because the Portuguese embassy was right next to it. So it was nothing to do with the arch itself, it's about the location. And so you can see it had been considerably changed over the 1400 years since it was put up in Marcus's lifetime. But you can also see, if it's pointed there. Okay, you can see there's these panels. Now, fortunately, the Pope retained some of these panels while demolishing the arch. And you can see some of these in the Capitoline Museum in Rome. And here we see Marcus Aurelius. He's got the priestly veil over his head, and he's about to offer a sacrifice. So these panels were removed prior to the destruction of the arch. Now, it's such an amazing sculpture, isn't it? It's virtually in 3D. You've got Marcus there, you've got musicians preparing for the sacrifice, you've got a worried-looking bull in the rear, and you've got the attendants with their different tools. Here's another of them. Now, this is Marcus on his horse, and you can see it's a very similar attitude to the famous equestrian statue of Marcus, which is, well, it's deep in the Capitoline Museum basement now, and there's a replica up on the Campidoglio out for the tourists to see. But again, you can see how it's virtually 3D. You know, the horse is coming out of the panel. Marcus's gesture with his right hand out, now that's also like the equestrian statue. We're told that Marcus, despite having these campaigns in the north with the northern tribes, the barbarians, that he wanted to bring them into the empire. He didn't want them to be garrison war zones. He wanted them to be peaceful provinces. This is the Sarmatians, the Marcomanni and the Quadi, areas that are now Austria and Hungary. We're told that if he'd lived, he would have brought them in as peaceful provinces. And so this gesture of the right hand out to the barbarians, supplicating below, this is the gesture of a pacificator in Latin, a peacemaker. So, of course, it is also true of the Romans that, as Tacitus said, they make a desert and call it peace. That's certainly an aspect of that. They brought peace through war. But this, we're told, is Marcus wanted the peace. He wanted the people to see that he conquered in battle. He wanted to bring them in as peaceful provinces. And that's what his gesture here is indicating. So we can forgive Pope Alexander for demolishing the arch because he preserved these amazing sculptures. Okay, so just as the Via Flaminia was the great northern highway out of Rome, the Via Appia was the great southern highway. It's closed to traffic now, and it's just a wonderful place to walk or cycle and view these beautiful, beautiful trees and brave monuments along the property. Now, part of the property was owned by Herodes Atticus, who was Marcus Aurelius's Greek rhetoric tutor when he was younger. Now, Herodes Atticus was kind of like a mega celebrity. He was one of the richest people of his day. He was a great public speaker and rhetorician, but he was also a very difficult man. And I think we can see Herodes offered Marcus a bit of a how not to about a lot of things. Anyway, he owned a lot of property on the Appian Way, but also there were estates owned by the Quintilii brothers. Now, Herodes and the Quintilii were sworn enemies, and they were always causing trouble for each other. But the Quintilii were close friends of Marcus Aurelius. Unfortunately, they were consuls, they were great servants of Rome, they governed provinces. Unfortunately, when Commodus came to the throne, he thought their property on the Via Appia was so beautiful, he wanted it for himself, and he had them put to death. Now, I didn't actually see, supposedly, the tomb of Seneca. I don't know if anyone's seen it on the Via Appia, but I was so occupied with everything else, I didn't actually notice it that day, but it's supposed to be there. Okay, so finding Marcus in different places in Rome. So here in the Borghese Gardens, there's this beautiful half-ruined temple of Antoninus and Faustina. Now, Antoninus was Marcus's predecessor and role model as the great emperor. Unfortunately, this temple's actually a fake. It's not a really ancient temple, or it's not even the bits. Actually, some of the bits are ancient, but it was actually put together in the late 18th century when there was a vogue for these things. There's also ones in Vienna, there's all through Europe, there are these fake Roman structures. But you can see a small stele on the left, and there's actually a matching one on the right. They're important for Marcus studies. And because they contain a long inscription in Greek commemorating Regilla, the wife of Herodes Atticus. Now, Regilla, her other name was Annia Regilla, so she was part of the Annii clan, so she was actually a relative of Marcus Aurelius. Now, there was a terrible scandal in 160 when Annia Regilla died violently, and Herodes Atticus, her husband, was implicated in the death. If you've read Dr. Robertson's books about Marcus, this comes up there. So it was a terrible scandal. Herodes was implicated in his wife's violent death, and his wife was a relative of the emperor. Now, without going into all the details, Herodes, it was typical of what he did here, which was to, in a way, try and cover everything over by having this beautiful inscription put up about how wonderful his wife was. And he was commending his wife, Regilla, in the next world, in the Elysian fields, to the care of Marcus Aurelius's mother, Domitia the Seller. So I wasn't really looking for this, but here was a piece of Marcus family history in the Borghese Garden. This one I was looking for. Now, this is the Antonine pedestal. It's the base of the great column of Antoninus Pius. Now, in Rome, we have two surviving columns. So we have Trajan's column and we have Marcus Aurelius's column. But there was also a third one, and it was Antoninus Pius, who died in 161. Again, the great mentor and predecessor of Marcus. Now, it seems to me, with all of Marcus's writings, except for his letters, that he wrote to Fronto and others in his youth, and the meditations, everything, and he wrote quite a lot, but everything else has perished. And yet we have this, which I think he probably co-designed. Because in 161, Marcus Aurelius and his co-emperor Lucius Verus, who were the heirs, they would have to organise all the funeral and so on for Antoninus and organise this beautiful column which they put up on this beautiful pedestal. Now, this was a detail of the figures on the pedestal. This winged figure, and it's Antoninus and Faustina are the small figures above the winged figure. So this winged figure here has been identified as symbolising aeon or time. And we know from Marcus' meditations that's a preoccupation of his. He talks about ion x ion, from eon to eon, from age to age. So I think this probably maybe was co-designed by Marcus, in which case it's a piece of his creative work surviving from his middle life between the letters and the meditations. So from Rome, we headed north over the Alps, just as the legions did. We went by train, which was much easier than the way the legions did it. But it did remind me that Marcus, Faustina, and all their children, and there are a lot of them, were always on the road. Faustina was given the title Mater Castrorum, the mother of the camp, recognition of the fact that they were always on the move. They were always in camp, year upon year at a time. And we forget how difficult that was, especially with young children. Now, this is from Carnuntum on the Danube frontier, east of Vienna. Now, from the meditations, we know that some of them were written at Carnuntum, because that actually says at Carnuntum, with a K, of course it's Greek. And it's just a 45-minute train ride east of Vienna. It's the site of a major legionary fortress, and we know, as I say, Marcus visited there and spent time there. Now, he may even have died there, although there's different accounts. He may have died in Vienna proper, or in Sirmium, now in Serbia. But you can see the beautiful landscapes of the Danube plains. The most famous image of Carnuntum is the Heidentor, the Heathen's Gate. Now, this is actually from a slightly later generation, but it's so evocative and it survives out there in the fields, well worth a visit. Here, they have excavated the amphitheatre at Carnuntum. It held 13,000 people, they've estimated. So you can see that. We know that Marcus wasn't keen on the gladiatorial games, but he no doubt had to put an appearance there as elsewhere. Who could this be in Scotland? It's Marcus Aurelius. So again, this is an unexpected Marcus sighting. If you've been to Stirling Castle in Scotland, it's magnificent. It was one of the vanity projects of King James V of Scotland, who was a totally up to the minute Renaissance prince, and he had these what they're called sterling heads. So there are all these ceiling medallions with great role models from the past, as well as family members of the Stuart family. And Marcus was just coming back into prominence at this time as a model for princes. And so he was depicted in the sterling heads. This coloured version is a reproduction. This plain version is how it survived, a bit damaged. So they've reconstructed them with the gaudy colours originally. Scotland has the Antonine Wall, the great Roman frontier from the north, the first northern extent of the Roman Empire. It's not a stone wall like Hadrian's Wall, so it was an earth wall, so there's actually not that much to see, but it's still well worth a visit. And this was the site of the town and camp of Tremontium, which was again a great military centre, the first small fortress in the Roman Empire. And the last coin that's been excavated there was 180, which of course was the year of Marcus's death. So we think that by 185, in the reign of Commodus, Tremontium was abandoned. And that's all you can see now. This inscription that's been set up, kind of looking pretty recent, well, it's actually recent, it's 20th century. They did, early in the 20th century, the whole site was excavated, but then they covered it over again, which is what happens a lot now in archaeological practice. So you go there and have to use your imagination about the camp and the bathhouse and the theatre and the amphitheatre and everything that would have been there. So the Romans withdrew from Scotland, but northern Britain remained important in the Roman world. The Emperor Constantine was declared Emperor at York in 306. So while the Romans struggled to hold on to Scotland, and neither Antoninus Pius nor Marcus nor Commodus ever went to Britain. Septimius Severus, who came on a little bit later, he was actually on active service in Britain, so he knew it. But yeah, this is just a bit of a glimpse of some of the kingdom of gold, which I try and cover in my book, trying to find some of the legacies of Marcus Aurelius, which survive and which we can go and explore today, which is amazing. So I'm hoping that book will be out next year. Okay, well, that's actually the end of our formal activities for the day. We have got a booking at 5 at the Emerald Peacock for drinks. If people are interested in that, I'm sure they will.